Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play Suzerain. Let me get my timer started on time this time. And we have the Alliance of Nations Assembly meeting now. This is, well, I guess probably just the flight, I guess. I, David Whiskey, and the rest of the Swordish delegation to the Alliance of Nations arrived in Kairut. Okay, never mind. The local police escorted us to the Alliance's headquarters in downtown Constantium, immediately recognized by its shining dome. On entering the building, we were met by a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the third floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and took our designated seats. David sat next to me. All of the world's most powerful people under one gleaming dome. One wrong word and the world will go to hell. High pressure, I know. Just believe in yourself, Anton. From what I've seen, you'll do just fine. How are you feeling, Anton? Being the subject of so much media attention must take a toll on you and the family. We knew dredging Sordland would be hard, but we could never have expected it to be this way. It is tough to be the president, making harsh decisions and dealing with their consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time has been a cruel mistress. What you've done so far is more than enough. Don't treat yourself so harshly. From a distance, we could see the president of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session is about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's going to be a long day. After a short opening speech, President Nines called the first speaker to the floor. It is my great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lispia to address the assembly. Patricio Alvarez stood and walked up to the podium as the assembly applauded. Mr. President, it is my pleasure to return to this podium. David leaned in and spoke in a low voice. Let's see how crazy this year's session will get. I'm surprised he isn't drunk. David chuckled. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was of encouragement and support to this organization and the vital role it plays. Of all the challenges Eastern Marcopa and the whole world has faced since then, one has grown larger and more imminent than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table of Vogsland. I saw Emmerich Hegel pounding his fist on his table in protest. Looks like the Chancellor is already mad. David nodded. Today, the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever. The CSP, under the leadership of United Cantana, has been fueling Vogsland's military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in Eastern Marcopa. The world cannot turn a blind eye to the increasing naval presence of Vogsland in the Markian Sea. We hereby call for the immediate withdrawal of all naval vessels with any offensive capability from international waters. A lot of noise came from the assembly hall in response. Most of the Western Marcopan delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Let us also not forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist leanings, a state that wages war against its own innocent citizens, Wayland. I think we'd have a hard... From what we saw, I think I've really kind of struggled to make an argument that Wayland is socialist. They may be governed by a party that calls itself the Wayzin Nationalist Party of Nearest Socialism. Which I think I can already kind of see where they're going with that name. But what we saw of them, I really don't think we could actually say that they're socialist. That's a bunch of horse shit. Wayland is not even socialist. Strictly speaking, Smolak's party is called the Wazig Nationalist Party of Nearest Socialism. Again, they can call themselves whatever they damn well please. It doesn't actually mean that they follow anything about it. Their purge of the minorities in their country was, again, largely ignored by the international community. I would go as far as to call it a genocide. Says the dude who, if it should be noted, if you close your borders to assist Wayland in their operation, they go to Lisbia instead, and he throws a hissy fit about you when you end up eventually going to Lisbia for trade talks. So, he says largely ignored by the international community, but what the fuck is Lisbia doing about it? Absolutely nothing. Wayland violated our past treaties and mobilized their armed forces, deploying them close to our borders and authorizing them to partake in massacres. Okay, yep, true. Lisbia was affected not only by the large wave of refugees coming from Wayland, but by the subsequent government seizure of all of our companies that were active in the country. We hereby call the member states to action against Wayland and its rogue government. Thank you. I clapped. He walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Markopian delegates. President Nines waited for the noise to calm down. The next speaker will be Victor Smolak, president of Wayland. Smolak stood up. As he walked past Patricio Alvarez, he brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arm. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with a microphone for a few seconds, then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised the height of it. I think the real chaos will start now. Let's hope not. Victor turned to President Nines and bowed slightly. Mr. President? He then turned back at us and stared out into the hall for a few seconds. Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of those challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gather here in Kairut. And what do? They make threats, promote hate, and spread lies. Is this the alliance of nations we all want? Where is the cooperation and friendship? Where is the unity? I would remind you of the wars that the West fought on our soil, of the foreign troops who occupied our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you that how they stole the oil from our sacred soil, and they did not know when to stop. The ATO soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose sole purpose is to create terror inside our country. So, fellow delegates, don't you dare speak about Wayland before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war, before you acknowledge your own dark past. That's an empty argument. It doesn't justify what Wayland did. What did you expect, Mr. President? It's President Smolak. As is well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Wayland Civil War, Acacia made a deal with United Cantana, where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops, along with the removal of half of our army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone in facing the genocidal Bludish Freedom Front, which the ATO funds together with Rumberg. I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference. He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth. I have clear evidence of direct aid from Rumberg to the Bludish Freedom Front. They smuggled tons of KA-74s in Wayland. They smuggled in their spies, smuggled in mercenary commanders. He's got balls taking on Rumberg in the West like that. David nodded in agreement. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the investigative affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect the organization to do its tasks and investigate this properly, instead of leaving Wayland behind as they have always done. Coming back to the claims of the Lisbian representative, first, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the Wesek forces, nor so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation was limited only to the militant BFF, not the Bloods in general. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of the BFF, and that your oil companies aided their militants during the operation. Fourth, As the state, we only took what was ours. The companies that delegates spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were brought to Wayland by force. Know that Wayland will no longer recognize the rights of any other country to determine what type of weapons we are permitted to possess or what type of policies we follow within our borders. Wayland stands stronger and more united than ever. Our people have spoken. The enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now I ask every delegate here to read our report on the connections of the West with the armed militants in Eastern Maricopa, and I ask the Alliance of Nations to do what's right. Wayland only wants peace. Our people want peace. They are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. Their proclamation is free Wayland or death. The assembly roared with particularly loud applause coming from the seats of Riken nations. He seems to be popular with Rika, doesn't he? Well, he played the victim here pretty strongly, and his anti-imperialist stance has definitely earned him sympathy from Rikens. I don't know who that is exactly. I'm assuming that is a group of people and not an individual country. Most of that continent has still not achieved stability after gaining their independence from their colonial suzerains. Okay, so that's probably like probably closest thing would be like this world's version of Africa, I'd guess. Yeah, probably closest thing for that. It's easy to forget it has only been a few years since the revolutions. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. He saluted the Riken delegates as he passed them. Next, President Nines invited Martin von Horten to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning and clenching his fist. I could almost see his jaw trembling. Seems like Martin is not in the mood. Can you blame him? His navy is being harassed by Vogsland every day now. Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly and friends, it is an honor to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances. Once again, the CSP nations, and in particular Vogsland, have shown us what they're willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must first thank the delegates from Sordland for being brave enough to support Agnolia when the world left us alone. We were one of the first countries to propose proper cooperation among Eastern Maricopan nations. Yet, when we were threatened by Vogslandian expansionism, nobody came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voiced his indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I cannot keep myself from wondering where he was when our fleets were under attack by the very socialists he spoke about. So here I am, asking for the support of the fellow member states of the Alliance of Nations. Agnolia is under attack by Vogsland. A loud banging noise emerged from the table of Vogslandian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on their table. Those delegates need to learn some respect, that's for sure. Mr. President, please moderate the assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Nines repeatedly banged his gavel. Order! Order! There will only be order when this coward stops smearing Vogsland's good name. Silence, Chancellor. Mr. Prime Minister, please continue. As you all know, our drilling ships, oil tankers, and even fishing vessels have been disappearing in the Markian Sea, captured or sunk by Vogsland. The Vogslandian fleet is patrolling the seas around Helgeland with complete disregard to international laws. I call on the Alliance of Nations to find a resolution to this never-ending conflict that Vogsland created. We demand the immediate withdrawal of all naval forces from our territorial waters. Malunivist terror surrounds us on all sides. I call the democratic world to action against the tyranny of Malunivism, authoritarianism, militarism, and extremism. The banging noise started again. Hegel stood up and approached the rostrum. You are a spineless jerk, a lackey of Arcasian imperialism. President Nine started hitting the gavel again. Speak up in support of Van Horten, I stood up. One second. Okay, I'm back. Let's see. Let's just go have some respect, Mr. Hegel. You have no right to interfere or intervene. Know your place, President Rain. Order! President Nine smacked his gavel in vain as a shouting match broke out in the assembly. Finally, after a few minutes, the other Volkslandian delegates convinced Hegel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about this subject. Everything is clear as day. Mr. Hegel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Volksland and their corrupted ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations soon. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Angolian delegate. The two left the assembly hall. The next speaker on the list is Emmerich Hegel of Volksland. Mr. Chancellor, I will remind you to respect the principle of civility and decorum in these halls. Hegel immediately took his place and spoke in a low, seething tone. Thank you, Mr. President. David, buckle up. It's the Chancellor's time now. It looks like you're having fun, Mr. President. First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new state from Reika, or the new states from Reika that have joined this organization. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they more than earned their membership vote. I am overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our numbers grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolutions to the conflicts that plague us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economics of Mercopa raised, pillaged, and exploited the continents of Reika and Xena. Sadly, Volksland was also part of this plunder in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the ideas of imperialism. But when our masses found their voice, the old colonial powers and their financiers turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolutions. They did not want the people to be heard. They are scared of us for showing the possibility of a better path. Of course they don't want us to succeed. We threaten the productivity that runs on the blood and sweat of their working class. And now they have started labeling us the aggressors. Yet we all know it was the Arcasians who built up military bases all around Mercopa. It was the ATO that was first formed to fight against Emalianovism. Just keep watching. Volksland holds the right to protect its territorial waters and trade from threats. The delegates from Lispia and Agnolia brought up the Falenko Treaty. But what were they doing when ATO forces patrolled the Antassian Sea? They were silent. And what about Heligoland? How about the Volgs being killed by the Angolan government or the Agnolian government because they protested against an appointed governor? Agnolia and their allies in Sordland have no right to claim they are upholding liberty and democracy. Other nations have no right to intervene in the matters between Agnolia and Volksland. Just as no country in the world has the right to determine what type of naval vessels we use, no country can force us not to defend our seas. If there's a conflict the Alliance can resolve, let's start with the Arcasian base on Ravnos Island. Lispia has been housing Arcasian troops and missiles by our border for years, and none of the member states have even talked about it. I also want the member states to look into the Arcasian bases in both Lispia and Sordland. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interests at heart, they cannot stay silent about what the Agnolian government did in Heligoland, how they took away the rights of our people. Perhaps then there can be proper dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willing to overlook such human rights violations. However, the Volkslandian government is ready as always to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of free people everywhere. He raised his left fist. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Was that Sordish? Did I catch that right? He said the revolution will come, yes, but it was an old Volgish. Very similar to Sordish, right? Some words are even written the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent. Most of the delegates from Xena, Rika, and Contana responded with thunderous applause. Kegel shook hands with them as he walked back to his seat. President Nines announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear leaders of the world, just as my fellow Eastern Marcopan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our continent, I also have to bring attention to the plight of the people of the North. The Alliance of Nations, the ATO, the CSP, and even the OMEC have never supported our people, even when they've been through tragic atrocities. Unlike many of the Western countries here, we never received financial aid when natural disasters struck our lands. The pain of our people was never recognized, not even when they faced the threat of genocide by the hands of the Swordish kings. In light of all that, I implore this alliance to take a closer look at the actions of our southern neighbors. They took in traitors and gave them protection. Their president himself came into power amid murder and unrest, yet people from his administration had the guts to blame our government for inciting violence. And they expect the world to believe their lies. That hag. Let's first hear her out. I hereby invite all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Sordland. If the Alliance continues to shirk its given duties, you can trust in Rumburg to take matters into her own hands. It is also important to point out that Rumburg will not stand idly by if more Arcasian military are transferred to Eastern Marcopa. I hereby condemn both the ATO and Sordland for allowing Arcasia to settle in our region. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Smolak, I'm looking forward to reading your report. I wonder what this so-called evidence is all about. Knowing that your slander does not work on us, know that we are ready to die for our freedom, that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. Thank you. Grand awakening? That sounded like a threat. She left the rostrum without getting much applause. Then President Nines announced the next speaker, Mr. Anton Rain, President of Sordland. I invite you to address the Assembly. David immediately started applauding. Good luck, Mr. President. I walked up to the rostrum and took my place at the podium. In front of me were some of the most powerful leaders in the entire world. I looked them in the eyes. Thank you, Mr. President, fellow delegates. Anyone who ascends this rostrum must appreciate what a significant gathering he is addressing. Just as the speakers who preceded me, we too have our concerns to raise in this noble assembly. Our people are still not free from fear, not free from poverty and starvation. Now it is important that more important than ever, that we set aside our differences and unite under this charter. I don't even think we're making any fucking sense. Now I'd like to address some of the topics mentioned here today. I condemn Smolak's crimes against the Brutish people. Sordland stands together with the Brutish people. I would also like to extend my support to Mr. Van Horten. The delegate from Magnolia is correct. We can't let the CSP threaten and dominate our seas. Sordland will do whatever, let's see. Yeah, Sordland will do whatever it takes to achieve peace in Eastern Marcopa. Emmerich Hegel pounded his fist on the table again. Peace! You can achieve nothing. You are a puppet of Arcasia. President Nine slammed his gavel down. Let's respond. I couldn't stop myself from responding. Mr. Chancellor, learn to have some respect. President Nine slammed his gavel down again. This is not the forum for such arguments. President Rain, please continue. Next, I would like to also address the Queen of Rumburg. She talked about some hypothetical threat that our nation poses to Eastern Marcopa, where Rumburg's military has tripled in the last decade. We wanted to be diplomatic even when Rumburg shot down our plane. I also have some evidence to show to the Assembly. Mr. Smolak was right about the KA-74s. We have discovered that many militant groups in Sordland were being financed or armed by Rumburg. Ooh. There is another important piece of evidence that we have, provided to us by someone close to the Rumburgian government. Mr. Hailstone was branded as a traitor in Rumburg for blowing the whistle on the country's hidden nuclear facilities. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to support Sordland. We are... I mean, yeah. I don't know if that's really the best way to phrase it necessarily. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty. Rumburg and its nuclear facilities must be properly investigated. Thank you for listening to our concerns. I wish to see a resolution from the AN soon. We stand and always will stand for the rights of the people of Sordland and Eastern Marcopa, just as those in other continents. The people of Sordland and I are honored to have expressed our concerns before this noble assembly. Let's see. A Morgana West Corps. There was some applause from the assembly. Thank you. I left the podium. I walked back to my seat. David did not stop applauding until I sat down. How was it? It was not a bad speech, Mr. President. You did well. President Nines announced the next speaker, Dwight Walker. Mr. President, I first want to congratulate you on your election to this high office. Mr. Secretary, delegates of the Alliance of Nations, ladies and gentlemen, fellow friends. I want to give this guy a Nixon impression. I really do, but I just can't do one. We met again on our quest to bring peace and light into this field, but even though some of the clouds have lifted, the world has not yet escaped the darkness. The Content and Security Pact is rapidly expanding its influence. It is very troubling to see the democratic nations in Marcopa be threatened by those Malunivist powers. I refer, of course, to the presence of Augslandian and Contentan fleets in the Marchian Sea. They are harassing other nations and hampering international trade. Is this not an attack against the world's peace? An attack against the free trading nations of the world? Today, our obligations to world peace are being tested by United Antenna and the Malunivist bloc. If we fail to counter this threat, we stay idle and allow them to surround us. Or if we stay idle and allow them to surround us with their war machines and blockades, if the attackers do not face any consequences, then this unstable peace we believed we had built will be the world's downfall, and posterity will point its finger at us for not stopping it. Emmerich Hegel and the other Vogslandian delegates started making noise again. This time, Hegel had taken off his shoe and was banging the table with it. I have no words. The Chancellor has gone mad. It's getting ridiculous. He's not even ashamed at his age. Despite its claims, the CSP's actions will only bring about war. Yet we still believe United Cantana and Arcasia, together with their allies, can come to an understanding for our mutual benefit and our desire to avoid the destruction of the world. We believe that all of the people of the world must be free to choose their own future. No country, be it Arcasia or United Cantana, has the right to impose its values on others. But I will say this to the leaders of United Cantana. If either of us is to be secure, we need a peaceful cooperation, not defense systems, forced blockades, or shows of naval superiority. If the Alliance of Nations cannot find a resolution to this conflict, the ATO remains ready and able to react. Hegel stood up with the shoe in his hand. What is that supposed to mean? You're promoting war in the Alliance of Nations? Mr. President, this cannot... Nines slammed the gavel down. Silence! Mr. Chancellor, please let me finish. We did not interrupt you when you addressed the Assembly. I must also raise my concerns about the threat that Rumburg poses to Eastern Marcopa. The speakers who preceded me clearly showed that tensions are rising. Reports from Wayland and Sordland are troubling. Representatives from both countries referred to Ka-74 as being smuggled within their borders. The Suzerain also pointed out the construction of nuclear weaponry in Rumburg. Our intelligence also confirms this. Arcasia and the ATO will stand against the aggression of Rumburg. They are playing a dangerous game, one that may ruin the Marcopa and their lands. Or that may bring ruin to Marcopa and their own lands. I believe the Alliance of Nations can find a resolution to this conflict as well. If not, let it be known that Arcasia will stand together with Sordland. Rumburg cannot do as it pleases. Do you think Rumburg can pursue any more aggression after that statement? I doubt that. With our membership in ATO and Arcasia's clear support, the Queen needs to be crazy to try anything. Okay, so she might still try something, because for all we know she could be crazy. Finally, I propose that the Alliance of Nations undertake the noble cause of helping the people of the world through rewriting and properly enforcing its human rights declaration. The Alliance of Nations cannot survive as a static organization. Its size and duties are increasing enormously. It should adapt to the changing world. But peace and rights do not rest in the hands of this organization alone. They rely on the hearts of our people and the spirit of cooperation between our nations. So let it be known, my fellow inhabitants of this world, let us take our stand and see if we can finally achieve a lasting peace. Thank you. Most of the assembly applauded his speech, the ATO delegates in particular. We'll applaud him as well. The applause continued for some time. Walker shook his hands with various delegates on his way back to his seat. President Nine spoke into the microphone once more. We have one final speaker before the break, Leon Malyanev of United Cantana. Malyanev slowly walked to the rostrum. In his iconic suit, all of the CSP delegates stood up and applauded him. Honorable Chairman and fellow delegates to the Alliance of Nations, we are again at the most esteemed meeting of state representatives in the world. However, increasingly we are being threatened, disregarded, attacked, or ignored in this assembly. The representative Arcasia has just shown this unfriendly attitude towards us yet again. Arcasia would have you believe we are standing in the way of lasting peace. Yet the peace they talk about was only possible thanks to our missiles and our growing base in the developing world. The ATO kept waging wars against people's revolutions and forcing new independent states to be their puppets, binding them to themselves through the Arcasian Lyra. And now yet another Arcasian president is telling us that we are the aggressors and they are the keepers of peace. We will not be silent anymore against these lies. When was this peace you talk about? When was this cooperation between our countries? Have you ever accepted our invitation to talk about denuclearization? If you don't like us, don't accept our deals. Don't listen to our concerns and keep pointing fingers at us. Why did you invite us to the Alliance of Nations? Every year, United Cantana comes to this assembly to address the real problems of real people. People who suffer because of your systems, your wars, and your ignorance. Whether you like it or not, We'll keep representing the laborers, the slaves, the oppressed of this world, and believe it or disregard it, history is on our side. We say to the representatives of capitalist countries, come and visit us, come and see the revolution working in Cantana. Show our continent to your people without distorting the reality. If you cannot do that, then you need not come. We believe socialism will triumph over capitalism in the end, such is the logical conclusion of the development of humankind. This time, the Lispian delegates started laughing very loudly. Some other delegates booed. We'll just keep watching. You can keep laughing, gentlemen. Communism will bury you. Suddenly the laughing turned into shouting. If you really believe in cooperation, we'll be waiting. We're not going anywhere. However, if the ATO keeps intervening in our matters, it is natural that the CSP would react. Despite threats from the ATO, Rumburg, or any other nation or organization, we must not succumb to further division and violence. We must ask ourselves, what do people of our country expect of us? They surely don't want war and bloodshed. So let us leave to our children and grandchildren good memories of our time and a better future for all. Let them look at history and say, once there were great divisions and complex problems, but the leaders of the world came together in the Alliance of Nations and succeeded in settling them in order to ensure our peaceful lives. Let us act in such a way to make this session not a session of threats, but a session of hopes and the realization of them. The government of United Cantana and the United Peoples of Cantana are ready to serve their duties for world peace. Long live the People's Revolution. It was a great speech. I'm just very concerned about the rising tensions between them and Arcasia. The assembly broke into massive applause. The applause continued for some time. Malyanev slowly walked back to his seat. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will reconvene later in the day for the final agenda items and closing remarks. David stood and stretched his arms. That was a lot. It was troubling. Tensions are too high. It's quite scary, to be honest. We need to be careful. We walked out of the hall to have some lunch and fresh air. And I'm probably going to end this part here. But first, let's see. What do we got here? ATO grants AGUARD observer status, addressing drug trade. Okay. I don't know where this country is. A significant shift in the geopolitical landscape, the ATO has conferred observer status upon AGUARD, a nation infamous for its central role in the drug trade spanning Kalrad, Erdmarg, Wayland, and notably AGUARD itself. While condemning the illegal activities, the ATO seeks a collaborative approach with a focus on the socio-economic impact of the rampant drug trafficking. AGUARD's narco-lord, Ciro Rios, has voiced intentions to legitimize the drug trade, aiming for regulation over exploitation. With Rios at its helm, AGUARD's entry as an observer into the ATO signifies a potential diplomatic approach towards tackling the illicit drug trade. This move indicates Rios' commitment to engage transparently with the international community, which, despite skepticism, offers an opportunity for dialogue and resolution. So there's AGUARD, okay. Now, what do we have for Cantana up here? CSP warns Grace against formation of anti-Malyanivist union. The Cantanan Security Pact has issued a strong warning to the Guild of Royal Allies for Commercial Exchange, condemning its plans to establish an anti-Malyanivist military alliance. The CSP accused Grace of actively undermining its ideological foundation and destabilizing the region, labeling the proposed military union a deliberate provocation. The statement described Grace's actions as a direct threat to peace and pledged decisive measures to counter what it sees as an escalation of hostility. Rejecting the notion of dialogue, the CSP asserted that Grace's intentions aligned with external powers seeking to weaken the pact. The leadership emphasized its readiness to defend its principles and regional interests against this perceived threat, calling on its allies to prepare for a united response to the growing ideological and military challenge. Election poll results. Our election polls show that roughly 16% of Swedish citizens would vote for the USP in the coming election. Jesus, that's terrible. ATO modernizes Sordland Air Force. The Air Force generals have been working tirelessly along with their ATO counterparts to modernize our Air Force. The regiment's training have been changed to include more maneuvering exercises as well as nighttime bombing training. Our warplanes have been retrofitted with the latest technology, radar systems, and cutting-edge bombs transported from Arcasia. General Staff reports that the Swordish Air Force has never been in better condition. Wonderful. Let's see. Chancellor Hegel's disgrace at Alliance of Nations. Alliance of Nations' latest session has ended with many important takeaways. However, the highlight of the gathering was without a doubt Chancellor Hegel. In a display of shameful behavior, Chancellor Hegel has repeatedly interrupted the Agnolian Prime Minister Van Horten and went so far as to require the intervention of the Speaker. We would like to remind that this was a meeting of the leaders of the world, not a village council. As long as this type of behavior continues, how can we ever expect a peaceful and level-headed resolution for the Heligeland issue? Oh god. Well, I guess we're not staying around up there for the second half of the conference, or, it happened off-screen type thing, because apparently we are back here and we have a private meeting with David Whiskey in the Maroon Palace. But that'll have to wait till next time. I will see you all then. Until then, goodbye and farewell.